For content information and the link to the written version of this story, please check the description. This week's story is called You Can't See It, and it's based on The Velveteen Rabbit by Margery Williams, 1922. If you would like to support me, both creatively and with my personal transition, please consider donating to my Cash App. The code is on the screen and will be linked down below, and it is 66 Jayjay 99. Thank you for your support, and let's get back to the story. It was done. They locked the nursery to keep the child inside, and everyone outside it safe. No one could quite explain what was amiss with the child, but it was clear they were in a great deal of distress. Tears flooded their pillow as they hugged their stuffed bunny to their chest. "What is wrong with me?" the child cried to the toy. "I know something is wrong, but I just can't quite understand it. No one can see it. Mother can't see it, Father can't see it, Nanny can't see it, and you can't see it." If the rabbit could talk, perhaps it would have been able to lend more comfort to the child. But this rabbit could not talk, or sing, or hop, or eat like the real rabbits could. It was just a toy. Perhaps the rabbit wouldn't be sure of what to say. This was, after all, a mystery. The rabbit was facing the old rocking horse, whose face, though aged, held wisdom to it. Perhaps the rocking horse would have been a better companion for the child. If you'd have asked a child, they would tell you that their rabbit needn't talk, as just being in their arms was enough to not feel alone. The child showed no physical symptoms of disease. There were talks among the adults that the plague was afoot, but they dismissed these fears, since there had been no cases in their village for at least a year. So what was wrong with the child? You could know something was wrong. It was clear as the button nose on the rabbit's face, but just as the child had claimed, you can't see it. In fact, perhaps nothing was wrong with the child. The problem was not with the child, but the way the world looked at them. It had been the adults that had called for the doctor. The child just wanted to be left alone in peace. They had their wish, but they had never expected to be locked away like a criminal. If one thing was certain, it was that this child was not a criminal. After a night locked in the nursery, the child stirred awake to the sound of the door unlocking. A tall man entered the room carrying a medical bag and wearing a long coat. He placed the bag down, opened it, and pulled out all manner of instruments. He checked the child's temperature. Nothing. Furthermore, he checked the child's reflexes. Nothing. And he checked the child's ear canal and his throat. Nothing and nothing. "Why, this child appears fine physically." He inspected the eye of the child. "I believe what ails this child is," the adults waited in anticipation. "Madness," the father gasped, the mother cried, and the nanny almost fainted. "I am not mad," the child spoke up. The doctor turned to face them. "Oh? So you know better than me? Do you? You know better than old Dr. Foster?" The child nodded. "I must do for you are wrong." Dr. Foster prepared to lay a hand on the child, but was intercepted by the mother. "Very well," the doctor said, straightening his tie. "If a child can defend their actions, then they must be right." He looked at the mother in her eyes. "Still, I feel this nursery is far too dusty. It cannot be good for a child's small lungs. I suggest you burn all dust collectors." The man smiled as he eyed past the mother and over to the rabbit tucked under the child's arm. The adults set to starting the fire. They pulled all the toys from the child's nursery and spread them out on the grass ready to be burned. The child could do nothing but watch from their window as their beloved rabbit sat depressed in the garden below. Dozens of toys surrounded the rabbit. Along with the rocking horse, there were tin soldiers and sailboats, all referred to as dust collectors. Of course this was not the case. Dr. Foster had made this up to punish the child for daring to speak against him. But who were the adults more to believe, a child or a doctor? It was dark when the adults had laid out the toys, so they waited till morning. None of them wanted to experience this drab affair in the dark. As they waited, the child was huddled under their covers, and during this time, a small fairy hopped out of the woods to investigate the situation. "Who would throw away such delightful things?" he asked himself as he dashed between them all. "Perhaps I should ask one of them." The fairy flew up to the rocking horse, but he decided his long face looked too sullen, and so he settled on the Velveteen Rabbit. With a tap to the nose of his wand, the rabbit twitched into life. "Wonderful evening, Rabbit," the fairy smiled. Good evening." The rabbit looked around confused. "What brings you out to the garden?" the fairy asked. Rabbit thought for a moment, lifting his little stuffed paw to his mouth. "I think the adult means to burn us." The fairy jumped back in shock. "My! Such an awful thing. We can't be having this. Why ever so?" Rabbit explained the situation to the fairy, who nodded in understanding. "If you wouldn't mind, dear Rabbit, perhaps I may help your friend." Rabbit nodded with enthusiasm as it hopped towards the door leading the way. The fairy fluttered over to the bed as Rabbit followed. The twinkling of the fairy's wings stirred the child out of their covers. "Who's there?" they asked. "I'm here to help you." The fairy smiled, not revealing his name. "You can't help me. No one can." The child prepared to dive under the covers again. The fairy looked over to Rabbit, who hopped up onto the bed. "We can only try." The child peeked out of the covers to see their bunny standing before them. "My word! You can talk?" Rabbit nodded with the twitching of its nose. "This fairy brought me to life. Trust me, old friend, he can help." The child considered these words for a moment before turning to the fairy. "Can you help me?" The fairy nodded. "If only I knew what was wrong," the child sighed. "I've seen this before," the fairy realised. "You have?" both child and rabbit said in unison. "I believe so. A young tree nymph was sad because he couldn't be himself. The world saw him as something he wasn't. Does this sound familiar?" The child responded. "A little, I suppose. I don't feel quite myself." The fairy rested their tiny feet on the bedsheet and strode over to the child's face. "Poor thing. You don't know who you are." The fairy sat cross-legged, having a deep think of what to do. Rabbit and its child waited as patient as they could. "Well," the fairy began, tapping a little finger to his chin, "I can give you more time to figure it out for yourself." The child gasped with relief. "You could? That would be just perfect." The fairy got to his feet, lifted himself into the air and flew over to the child's nose. "I can. There may not yet exist a means to help you, but I can pause you as you are until there is a way, or until you no longer need the extra time. The magic I'm giving you is irreversible. It will stay with you until you no longer need it and will cause you no harm. In fact, I should say it will help you a great deal more than any side effects it might hold." Rabbit placed a paw on the back of the child's hand as they thought about this offer for a moment. "I'll take it. I'll take any help you can offer me." An enormous smile covered their face. The fairy smiled and pulled out his wand. "Now, I will check back with you every few months, but Rabbit here will remain with you this entire time. It looks like you could do with a friend." The child placed their nose to the rabbit's, and they rubbed them together for a moment. "The adults," the child remembered. "They mean to burn." The fairy placed a hand out to stop the child. "There will be no burning, I assure you. I'll have my nymph friends create a storm that should put your family off the idea of burning your toys for enough time to see that your pain has been eased." The child let out a sigh of relief, and their rabbit jumped up and down with joy. Without waiting another moment, the fairy waved his wand just above the child's right wrist and tapped it, sending a wave of euphoria to flow through the child's veins. "Thank you so much." The child closed their eyes, relieved. When he opened them again, the fairy was gone, and it was just them and their toy bunny. Thank you for listening to this sweet story. If you would like to hear more stories, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the notification bell to get notified of more videos on this channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye.